Who is going to be the main event of UFC 300? That is the biggest question in combat sports right now. And everybody has thrown out their ideas. The number one leading theory is that it is going to be the return date of Conor McGregor for his fight with Michael Chandler. Now, one thing I will say is that John Kavanagh himself says that him being able to fight on UFC 300, this is Conor McGregor's head coach, by the way, is going to be extremely difficult. He says they are trying their very best to get Conor McGregor ready for 155 when April comes around. But it's proving pretty difficult. It's possible, but understand that that's where we're at right now. Kavanagh went as far to say to Ariel Helwani that he won't be able to make it. And then Conor goes on Twitter, maybe intoxicated, maybe not, saying, "What do you mean I can make UFC 300? And that's the issue that we're in with Conor. I'm going to assume Conor can make UFC 300, because if there's no Conor, we have a huge problem. Now, Chael Sonnen, in one of his YouTube videos, I believe it was just called Who Should Main Event UFC 300, he put up a few candidates. Those being Khamzat Chimaev and Israel Adesanya, just to name a few. Khamzat, that's not going to be able to do it. UFC 300 is during Ramadan. Now, maybe we could see some bending of the rules in Khamzat Chimaev, because he isn't a part of the Dagestani crew, contrary to most people. But Israel Adesanya's return fight, that's extremely interesting. And Chael goes on to state the reasons why. And I agree with this. Now, he is explicitly stating Israel being the main event. He's not saying co-main. He's saying Israel Adesanya could come back as the main event spot to Conor McGregor's co-main. And I like this, because we have two big matchups. One of these being probably top 5 biggest matchups in UFC history. The other being potentially decent. I'm going to go over the decent matchup, and then we're going to go over the legacy-defining matchup. Number one, if Dricus du Plessis is able to get a win over Sean Strickland and goes on the microphone, starts talking shit about Israel Adesanya was never an African king like me. I will bring this belt back to Africa, my home country where I train out of. That was the start of the whole beef between Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya. And if he goes on the microphone and does that, and we get a reverse where Israel Adesanya goes in as the challenger to face off against the champion Dricus du Plessis, the UFC could justify and use that footage as a promo for Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis. Whether you agree with Israel getting another championship shot or not, the UFC will justify it, and they will say, well, this is the fight that the fans want to see. And to be honest, I don't mind that. The other option, the biggest problem with the Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya fight, is even with hype, it is hard to justify putting that over Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, purely based on numbers. But the next matchup, we don't have that issue. And that is the trilogy bout between Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. I know some my viewers are going to go in the comment section and say, Jamal Hill versus Alex Pereira is all but confirmed. You have Ankalaev fighting Johnny Walker. That's a number 1 contenders match. And you are 100% right. Jamal Hill might not be able to make UFC 300. Ruptured his Achilles. You have stuff going outside the octagon that could complicate things. And Alex Pereira, in his post-fight call-out, calls out Israel Adesanya, reaches out his hand, and gives Israel a chance to fight for the light heavyweight title, the belt that he always wanted but never was able to get. And if you're anything like me, you thought that, they're going to make this 100%. Because if you don't know, the UFC always wanted to make Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya the trilogy if Alex Pereira won the belt. That's why everything seemed to line up perfectly for Israel to defend his belt in Australia, and they were going to make Dricus du Plessis fight on short notice with an injury because they were setting up Israel Adesanya with a layup win. And the UFC is still pissed at Dricus for that, I guarantee you. And I thought in this scenario, we could still make this matchup. Alex Pereira has made it so easy for the UFC to do this that all they have to do is just use that as a promo. Use footage from the kickboxing matches, the first fight and the second fight, light heavyweight belt on the line, a returning Israel Adesanya, new division. Maybe he's been building up weight in this off time. And that's your promo. And then the UFC, Dana White himself goes into the post-fight presser and says, well, Israel Adesanya is a middleweight. Alex Pereira is a light heavyweight. I don't understand that, Colo. I don't understand. What do you mean? That was the fight that you were trying to make the entire time. But that's beside the point. That's a different rant. So the UFC seemed to close the book on that trilogy, which is so dumb. But then now we have Israel Adesanya posting clips and professionally made edits, even teasing an Alex Pereira fight at light heavyweight. And this has been done multiple times. And if you're anything like me, I don't understand the gain of hyping up a matchup that the fans want to see, that there is a demand for. That's the word that Chael used. If there is a supply and a demand, it will be met. The demand for Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya is at bare minimum a main event. So I don't understand the joking of it because it makes Israel look worse. And I think he knows that. That is, unless he's actually trying to make this matchup. Imagine like tomorrow, the UFC comes out and says the main event of UFC 300 isn't going to be Conor McGregor. It is going to be Alex Pereira defending his light heavyweight title against Israel Adesanya. And then you have Jamal Hill over here. It's like, where's my title shot? All they have to say is that this is UFC 300. Crazy stuff happens. We do this for 100. We did this for 200. It's just going to be one event out of the year. Let's have fun with a matchup. And the fans will get behind it. I'm not even an Israel fan. I will get behind this matchup. Now, who do I think wins? I'll save that for if the fight actually gets made. But you can so easily make make Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya the main event of UFC 300. Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler is the co-main. The pay-per-view numbers are going to be so vast that you can pay Conor more than you're paying Pereira. That's another thing. Israel's a challenger. He's not getting champ pay. I know you can't justify putting him in any other spot on a card aside from a main event because of how much the UFC has to pay him. But he's not getting pay-per-view numbers. You don't get pay-per-view numbers unless you're a champion. And instead we're talking about extenuating circumstances and you're the main event spot. But the person who's going to be getting pay-per-view shares is Alex Pereira in this situation. And as much as we love Alex Pereira, I doubt Alex is getting crazy pay-per-view numbers. Conor will be getting most of the pay-per-view shares, even as the co-main event. The fans will come for that fight, and they'll come for the main event spot. I know Bo Nickel is supposed to be on there, too. Apparently, he's supposed to open up the prelims. I'm sorry, I just don't give a shit, because at the end of the day, we're paying for the card. We're paying $80 for a card that doesn't have a main event, doesn't have a co-main event, doesn't have a feature fight. We have rumors. So I'm trying to make this easy for the matchmakers. Pereira, Israel Adesanya 3, main event, book it. That's my thoughts on UFC 300. If you enjoy this type of video, please consider a like, a share, comment. If you've subscribed, please hit the bell icon. Really helps me in the algorithm. And I think that's all I gotta say today. Adios, guys.